Welcome back to another episode of What Are You Made Of with your boy, the unstoppable Mike C-Roc. I'm in the house today with some friends of mine from the tech incubator that I'm involved with, which is it's a crazy journey that we're all on, and it's exciting. But I want to support all the people that are in this this pot, we'll call it, together. I want to support them all, and I want to help elevate people because that's my mission. All people are unstoppable to live in their life for their dreams, and so I wanted to bring some friends of mine on. And, let me first of all, before I do that, thank you all for showing up and listening to these podcasts and watching them. If you watch them, it means the world to me to have your support. It means the world to me that you've read my book, Rocket Fuel. If you haven't, go get it and read it so I can thank you for reading it. And just the fact that you show up each and every week, twice a week, I want to thank you. And I really sincerely mean that. So Dr. Lukens is on the show today with his sidekick, Holly. He's a clinical psychologist and emotions theorist, specializing in human motivation, and his sidekick Holly is a behavioral scientist, right? And what are your thoughts of? I'm reading this by guys. What are your thoughts? Just discuss the topic. Oh, so we're going to discuss the topic of defeating self-defeatism. All right, look, this I've been doing like 200 shows, and I still mess up, and it is what it is. I just roll. So show must go on. What's up? How you doing, Dr. Lukens and sidekick Holly?
We're good. We're good. I'm good.
Hey, I always pretend I have a good audience, right? But I always pretend nobody ever sees it anyway, because in promotion and business, promoting is so important, and you got to promote, and then forget about it, and then do it again, because pretend nobody ever saw it, because all the stuff that we put out there is only a drop in the bucket, really.
Yep.
So
I remember you saying that one time on one of our SELA meetings, and I thought that was a very impactful way to look at it.
Yeah. And, I've been mentored by some maniacs, so they think that way. So anyway, the show always starts with this question, and, occasionally I'll have a couple people on instead of one, and I want to ask both of you this question. So we'll start with ladies first. Holly, what are you made of?
What am I made of? I'm made up of all of the experiences I've had in my life. And
hold on a minute. I don't mean to interrupt you, but you got to get that's like the definition of what are you made of. We don't want the definition.
I'm gonna give you something good here.
I'm going to make sure that I get something good from you guys.
Oh, you will. I promise you. So I am made up of all the experiences I've had in my life, but also I'm made up of my mother's guiding hand and my conscience in choosing right from wrong for myself and for others and for the world. So in reality, my experiences have played a role in who I have become, but I was shaped into the type of person that really wants to change the world simply because my mom helped develop my conscience. So I would say, what am I made of? And it's a very well-developed conscience that I work on every single day.
Love it. We'll dig into that in a second. Dr. Lukens?
Yeah, that's a good question. So how did I get here? What am I made of? I don't know what question I really want to answer there, but I look at myself relative to my DNA, my parents. My dad was an engineer, knew a lot about things. My mother she was actually a Catholic, but was more Christian than most Christians. And so she had a loving heart, and he had a hyperactive head. So I got some of both of them. And I've been trying to understand the human mind like a machine. So I want to understand it from the standpoint of what is love and what does that mean, but I also want to look at it in terms of efficiency and how it works as a machine. So I see the direct contribution from the two of them in terms of the work that I've been spending my whole professional life on.
I love it, man. And, that's a really interesting topic, because our mind is with us at all times, and it affects so much. And, defeating self-defeatism, it's a crazy thing. And I don't know, I'm just getting into this book, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, and I don't know if it goes against what you have studied or talk about, but, and I'm not trying to promote anybody, but there's a book called The Folly of Fools. And I just got it. I haven't started reading it yet, but Ty Lopez talked about it. And I'm just, are you familiar with it?
No, but it's a good title. I like the title.
Yeah, I've never heard of it either. So we'll do some digging on it.
It's
know how it is.
The logic of deceit and self-deception in human life. So I'm obsessed with this right now.
That sounds like it's very much in agreement with my theory about all this. So, part of the reason we're self-defeating is we have this mind that's with us all the time, and we hardly study it. We don't actually study ourselves. We're busy every day being ourselves, taking what makes us tick for granted until we find ourselves breaking down. Then it's like, and then we look, and then we're looking problem focused. Like we don't study it just because we want to know. And that's a shame because there's so much to learn. So we're a pretty complicated species in case we haven't recognized.
Yeah, I think we're the only living organism that justifies why we didn't get what we want or why we didn't achieve what we wanted to.
Yeah, we tell great stories. We have, these narratives and these dramas and whatnot. And sometimes we get so preoccupied with that shit, we actually forget to live.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sad. Like, this is a perfect timing that we're, talking about this and having you guys on the show, because I'm absolutely obsessed with this. And just this week, I did a talk on, one was causing and creating your future. And the other one was, what story are you telling yourself?
Yeah.
And, we all have this story that we're telling ourselves, many of them. And, at the end of the day, if you can just stop telling the story of why you failed and start talking about why you're winning, that helps. But I'd love to hear your take on this and where this comes from. And before we do that, though, I want to know, where's the mind actually located?
Well, it's interesting you ask that question. So one of my favorite theorists is actually a theoretical biologist from Chile. He passed away this past year, but so he's going on record as saying the mind is not in the head. And his argument is that the mind actually exists in the space between people. Now, it would take a month of Sundays to explain why he thinks that. But to that point, it's not in the head. It's in some sort of virtual space that exists between people, which is part of the reason why when we tell our stories, we actually need to have somebody to tell it to. You contrast that with the homeless person on the street who's just talking to themselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The rest of us need to have somebody else like nodding, just like you guys are right now when I talk. Right? Yeah. Okay. You get me? Yeah. Part of the reason we got to keep our stories intact, but then we confuse the story with reality, and that creates a whole lot of mischief. And then when reality deviates from our story, guess what we cling to? Our story, rather than get with reality. Like the story should get thrown out. It should be revised frequently. It's not a set of commandments, it's a description. And people take it like it's a set of commandments, a set of conclusions. And, I don't know that people tell a good enough story based on their pain, their struggles, their confusion. What kind of story do you come up with there? A lot of excuses. You've heard that cliche, in life there's results or there's excuses. Well, that's sort of the cornerstone of a lot of motivational speakers. But I think there's more to it than that. And having studied the mind, I can sort of, say with some confidence. People are self-defeating because they don't understand their fear, their anger, their sadness, their disgust, their guilt, their shame, their interest, their desire, or their joy. Meaning we don't understand our own equipment.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why it doesn't work so well.
Yeah. It's these are things beyond our six senses or our five senses. But these are things. What would you call those? Would you call them faculties that we don't use and we don't study?
That's it. Well, there's the way that we operate, and the things that I just named are our basic emotions. So in my view, in my framework, that's the finite set of motivational energy for human beings. It's to be found in those 9 basic emotions. So, ask somebody what they're interested in. And it's kind of what you're asking us right now. What are you made of? Really gets to the idea of like, well, what interests you and where did those interests come from? So I may have an interest in, becoming successful. And I think all I got to do is want it and go for it. But then my fear stops me, or my anger and resentment stops me, or my sadness stops me, my grief. Think about how many people are walking around the planet with unresolved grief, with a collection of it. So part of the reason they don't go for their goals is they're actually intuitively concerned about there being more sadness. So they think of the goal and they start to approach the goal. Then the recognition that this could lead to a loss and create great disappointment and sadness shows up, and then the whole plan stops and it recycles. And that's just one example. If you're guilty, what guilty people is, they walk around the planet finding ways to punish themselves. and they don't realize that's what they're doing.
That's so why in Christianity they talk about why it's important to ask for forgiveness.
Totally. It's not just in Christianity, but yeah.
Well, but I mean, that's an example, right?
Yeah, that's an example. Yeah, it's very critical. And forgiving yourself, people don't think in those terms too readily, but that's critical. What are you holding against you? You say, what are you made of? My question on my podcast, say, well, what are you holding against you?
Yeah.
Because that's holding you back. That's holding you down. But people don't like to touch their guilt. So, all right, well, let's do a guilt review. Well, can we schedule it for a month from now? Because I don't feel like
Yeah.
Are you crazy? I don't want to go to my guilt. Well, then how do you expect to get out from under it if you don't go to it? So
that's a fear of judgment as well, right?
Well, the fear of judgment really relates more to the shame involved. But self-judgment. I'm guilty. I've hurt people. I've hurt people I love. And, what do you want to do about that? Well, get drunk and pretend I didn't. Well, then what's going to happen? You wake up tomorrow. They're going to be more hurt than they were today.
Yeah. And then so there's this buildup. There's this plaque, so to speak, that builds up and builds up and builds up. So with that being the case, like, what do you do? What's the first step to tearing that down? And by the way, I want to hear the story too. I mean, we're getting ready into some content here, but I want to hear the story too of how you guys met and how you decided to work together as well. But just let's do the
plaque question.
Yeah, let's go to the plaque question first, and then we'll get to that.
Dr. L, I'd like to touch on the fuck it bucket there, because what he's explaining is essentially what we talk about that builds up over time inside of it.
What's it called?
The fuck it bucket.
Oh, okay, got it. I was like, the what? You spoke it so fast.
The fuck it bucket is the place inside your mind where all your emotional incompletions live. So I never finished grieving. Plop, it goes into the fuck it bucket. I never expressed my anger to that person. Plop, it goes into the fuck it bucket.
I never stood up against a bully. Plop,
I never managed to get safe. Fear, stuck in your fuck it bucket. So the fuck it, and trauma, trauma just creates a big rock inside your fuck it bucket. Some of the fuck it bucket is hardened and concretized because it's been there so long and defended against so thoroughly. That's the stuff that oozes up from our unconscious. The middle layer is, stuff that's old and we're somewhat aware of it, but we're trying to freeze it and turn it to stone. On the surface is all the fresh stress and shit that I'm aware of. And when the bucket is too full and it starts to overflow, we have more than we can handle, we start to act out. It's not a choice. People think about all the acting out as a choice. If I fill your fuck it bucket to the point where it's overflowing, you will find a way to act out. Now that could look like a depression, and that's, might be a funny way to say acting out, but people will act out by getting depressed. In other words, I'm just going to take my ass and get under the covers and not show up in the world again for 2 weeks. That's acting out. That's what that is. We have more sympathy for it than for the addict who acts out, right? I'm going to use. And I'm going to get sober. And if I want to get sober, I have to make sure that I've emptied or partially emptied my fuck it bucket, because you will not have success if your bucket's overflowing. And people usually show up in crisis. Now the bucket's overflowing. They just want to handle the crisis. If as a coach or therapist, you help them reduce the volume in their bucket, but they leave the process, they quit the process, and they've got like that much room between the tip of their bucket, and so they're just going to fall apart again in no time.
Which is self-defeating.
So the real trick is to learn how to keep your bucket empty. Mm-hmm. And people that are enlightened and walking around, sort of like levitating through the world, have an empty fuck it bucket. And everything that bothers them is the thing that's bothering them. It's not connected to 700 other things under the surface.
Yeah, and then the least you keep in your fuck it bucket, the more liquefied it is and easier to empty out.
The easier it's emptied out, the more you have your consciousness, the further away you are from acting out, the more personal power you have, the more clarity you have about who you are and your values. And like Holly was talking about, your conscience, that like all the shit fits together better and just starts to work well. But that's a deep healing challenge. It's a deep healing process for everybody. Everybody's got a bucket and everybody's got shit in it. And past the age of 2, anyway.
Yeah.
And I'd like to speak to that real quick. So Dr. Lukens developed the analogy of the fuck it bucket. That's not something you're going to go find in like a textbook in psychology.
I was already looking it up, but I didn't see it. So
it's on our website. But yeah, it's his analogy he developed. But the idea here is that if you are not aware that you have all this, stuff inside and you're not working on it, that's being self-defeating. You could go out and say, I want a career in this and I want to succeed. But in reality, your bucket's so full, you really don't want that for yourself. So the two major points when it comes to defeating self-defeatism is to identify that you are the problem, that you might not want what you say you want as much as you think you want it. And that's because you're the one that's contending with you. It's an arm wrestle with yourself here. And that really does come down to how full your bucket is. And then, the second point is that you have to find out where the road is still unpaved. Really, these incompletions Dr. Lukens talks about is, the times the bullies bullied me and I didn't stand up for myself. Okay, well, that road might have continued to be paved where I learned how to defend myself in an appropriate way, but I got scared. And so the paving of the road stopped and then it was all dirt. So now I'm an adult and I have this life before me and I have 400 roads in front of me, but I can really only go down the roads that have pavement that I was able to actually build out in my life and develop of myself. The incompletions cause me to be forced choice into certain paths that I can take. And that's very self-defeating rather than doing the work to pave the roads in the places where it might be difficult. It's easier to drive down a road that's already paved than it is to pave a road and then drive down it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great analogy. And so I envision what I might want. And it turns out the visions of my desires are addressing the bully indirectly. And so what I end up wanting is a path that has no bullies on it. And then I kind of make up some interest in the thing at the end of that path. But really what I'm hoping for is a goal that I can achieve and never encounter a freaking bully. So I start down the path and then it's like the music from the movie plays in my head and I get my spidey sense and I think a bully's going to come and I'm not going to go down the path any further.
So you're playing it safe.
I play it safe. I go back to the center. I get depressed. I look around. I'm running out of options and I don't see myself stunting my own growth because I can't handle the bully trauma.
And how do you, so what's the first step? What's the first and maybe what's the first and second step?
You're not going to solve a problem you don't see or understand. So
acknowledging it.
Yeah. Seeing it, understanding it. And recognize that if you told a story about it and you're believing your story, you probably got to unpack it further. If it made sense to your story, it's probably cheating your unconscious and your subconscious. So we have to move into a space of uncertainty, insecurity, and vulnerability, or healing's not going to happen. This is hard for people to do. To just move into vulnerability. They say to themselves, I can't do that. It's going to hurt. And I can't tell them otherwise. You're right. But it's hurting anyway. It's hurting by keeping you from your own fulfillment.
Yeah.
So I don't want to have to do that. Like,
well, pick your bed, right?
Exactly.
Pick your bed.
I wish you didn't have to as well. But this is how it works. If you don't do it, you don't get there.
Yeah.
So you got to pump them up about the healing work that they need to do. And that's our job. We're supposed to pump people up that way.
And some people go through life never even acknowledging it or even exploring it or studying it or anything, man. Can you just imagine that?
No.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
I'm an animal, by the way, with this. Like I study all different kinds of, books, everything, and I link them up together because there's so many things that are common, whether it's psychology or spirituality or religion, therapy, like all these different things, right? But there's all common threads. There's all common threads. I think there's a great link there. So how did you guys meet? And what's the story of like that? And then also where you guys are going? What's your big vision?
Yeah. So essentially, I was doing business and marketing consulting, and my roommate at the time, she was looking for a new job, and so her mom was on Indeed. And Dr. Lukens had posted an Indeed posting looking for a social media consultant to help him with his private practice. So I answered the Indeed ad. We met up, and I said, okay, great. This sounds good for me. He brought me on. We started figuring out how we were going to market his practice and market therapeutic intensives, groups of therapy clients at a time. And then all of a sudden one day he was like, oh, by the way, I wrote a book. And I was like, oh, okay, that's really cool. And it was an addiction book. So we worked on the cover. And then the next thing I know, he's like, oh, I also have a very big book too. Would you be interested in that? It's theoretical. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Send me the manuscript. I start reading it. And I'm like, this could be so much more than a private practice. Like, we really need to get on this. And we just developed this concept of, after I started reading the book, I was just like, this is bigger than life. We need to build a brand around it. And he brought me on as a business partner, and we kind of just hit the ground running there. And he told me, you have the makings of what could be a great therapist and a great life coach. And so if you're interested in learning about that and my method, I'd love to teach you. And it kind of took off from there.
But did what you just said right there, what he said to you, did you have any idea of that in your head, or did that trigger something? You're like, whoa, he believes in me?
Yeah, it really came down to, I was like, oh, I've always been the therapist for my mom growing up, for my friend group. You know what I mean? Like, I'm the girl people go to and they need to talk about something. It always has been like that. And it clicked that, dang, maybe I've, been denying that piece of me as being something I could do. I wanted to be a doctor for the longest time, really, because I wanted to help people, but I realized I was more interested in helping their minds. And it wasn't until he gave me that vote of confidence that I was like, oh my gosh, I could actually do this.
Yeah. See how important that is for everybody listening, that when you give somebody a vote of confidence, like what it can do to their lives and change their lives and change their direction, and also the people that they can impact. Like, if he didn't say that to you, you may not be on a different journey. And then the people that you're helping, they may never been helped. So
all the clients I've given so much like personal power and freedom to as a result of working with me never would have gotten there. And it's crazy to think that. Yeah.
Great job, Dr. Mike.
I was correct, wasn't I?
Yes, you were.
I wasn't blowing smoke. It was kind of obvious.
So yeah, but that's the thing. Like, a lot of people observe things in people, but they don't speak up and share it with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying blow smoke or anything like that by any means, or manipulate, but definitely people don't speak up enough and give people a vote of confidence and observe, observation and feedback.
I think you're right. People are hungry for validation. We're all walking around a little hungry for that. So when you give it pointedly, it can really feed somebody a ton.
Yeah. Now, what's this book about? What's the big book? What's it called?
The Physics of Emotioning, a Constructivist Understanding of the Motivational Forces Governing Volitional Behavior.
Long title, Dr. Mike.
It's a long title, which is followed by a long book. So it's
1,200 pages.
It's 30 years worth of theorizing and work. And look, like I said, the mind's complicated. So I'm trying to describe the machine as I understand it. And there's just so much to it. So
now, did you journal? Did you just journal all the time growing up? Is that what happened? How did you get 1,200 pages?
He started this. What year did you start writing the book, Dr. O?
Well, it's a good question. The book has morphed. So when I first started out, I was intending to write a book about the therapy methodology only. But the more that I hung out and thought, I don't keep a journal. I just never stop thinking. It's like that kind of thing. I do this on vacation. I do this on vacation. I wake up in the morning and I think about these things, and I have the things that are pressing upon me in life, and I try to put those aside every day and think about how life works. That's just kind of what turns me on. That's my reverie,
Yeah, no, I feel that too. Like, not from you. I know that about you.
Yeah,
I feel that in myself. Like,
I can tell you're that way. You know what I mean? So, you can't get enough. Now, a while ago, I stopped reading other people's shit because I became more interested in my own. So that was the point at which I had a young psychologist who was doing his postdoc, a place where I was working as a consultant, and he co-facilitated groups. And this was 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And so I had done a lot of intensive therapy with clients. I was always doing intensive stuff, more intensive than the average therapist. And he was fascinated because he hadn't been exposed to anything like it. So he insisted that I explain what I was doing to him. And I realized I didn't really have a clear explanation. I had intuition a lot. I used my intuition a ton, I still do. But the other side of my brain was sort of engaged because I wanted to explain it to him.
Right.
Because he has some very good pointed questions. Like, I don't know, well, let me think about why I did that. And so that left me kind of moving into the method book, but it also got the conversation, can I explain my theory to myself? That was the question. Could I explain it to myself? So the real challenge for the book was I'm trying to figure out who my audience is. And the reason, it has the impenetrable title and it's so long is because I decided in the end, I have to talk to myself. I need to explain this so that I understand it, not so that others do. Then I could, once I understand it.
Which is where I come in. Now I
That's
make all the
right.
content that makes it understandable.
Right. But ironically, you understood the book as it was written, and you understood it pretty well.
I did.
So,
I remember walking to your office and just sitting down and being like, I get it. I literally just did it just like that. I was like, I get it. I get what you're saying here.
Now, is the book very difficult to read as far as words and you got to stop and look up words and all that stuff?
Every page. Yeah, it's difficult.
Well, shit.
Because I didn't write it to convey that to anybody else. The fact that Holly got it was gravy. You know what I mean? Like I needed to do a brain dump. I needed to get it down before I die.
Yeah.
And like Holly said, now we're busy trying to translate it and turn it into English and bring it to people,
Yeah, like for instance, just in the title, it's like volitional motivation. People don't quite know what that means.
Yeah.
Right. In reality, that it just comes down to the type of motivation that is a part of our willful actions. The difference between a doctor hitting you on the knee and your leg moving before you even
compared to reflex. Yeah.
Yeah. But then afterwards, what's volitional is now I think about it where after the doctor has done it, now I'm sitting there thinking, did my knee move too far? Is there something wrong? Is the doctor going to find something wrong with my nerve system? What are my reflexes? Are they okay? That's volitional because it's a thought process. Thinking is action. And it's something that can go through the mind part where I can talk to myself and stuff.
Yeah. Well, volitional generically means sort of voluntary, that we feel like there's a choice, although I take issue with the way that we define that. So I've got to call it volitional, and then I got to define what I mean by it specifically. And I've taken the liberty to define or redefine every single word that I feel is necessary to clarify. So one of the biggest things that we're going to be contributing is the understanding and the definition of love that I've developed. And so I define love as committed benevolent interest. We refer to it as CBI for short. And I think it's probably going to end up being the most important contribution because, now we're going to segue into what we're trying to do. If I could get the world to rediscover this fresher definition of love, the world will change. The world will change.
So, and let's get into what you're doing now with the tech side of things. But before I do that, what is, and it's just as short as you can, because I know we're tight on time and I want to respect your time. What is the difference between what you've come up with and any other psychologists or therapists or religions or like what would be the main difference?
I was giving that some thought how to describe that in 3 minutes and I gave up. But I'll try. So some of my assumptions about how the mind works are radically different from others. Just as one example, I have removed the idea of free will. So I don't know if there's another viewpoint in psychology that operates with that clear distinction. Take free will out of it. Yeah. B.F. Skinner, the noted behaviorist back from the 60s and 70s, he went on record as saying he didn't believe in free will. And he wrote a book, Beyond Freedom and Dignity, and he got attacked. Because people cherish their free will, their idea of free will. Like what happens to a sense of morality or religion, or even the institution of law, crime and punishment? What happens to all that if we question the legitimacy of free will?
Yeah.
Like I said, I saw from my father the idea that we could examine the human mind as if it's machinery. So in a sense, what I've done is I've brought science to spirituality and love. So you see how these things begin to kind of like approach each other. And it turns out that the pieces of the pie fit together pretty elegantly, even though it's complicated. Yeah. So what we've done in the app then is taken some of what I understand. And again, the free will was just one example. If I believe as a scientist and a behavior scientist that everything in the universe is lawful and determined, I can't believe in free will. I can't actually endorse the idea of divine intervention. I have to explain us sort of physically, materially, cause and effect. It's a scientific commitment I made at the outset. If I need to bring in divine intervention or I need to bring in free will, then I'm fucked. Just throw the theory out. It has to be able to explain everything organically. And
I think just to nail that down real quick, just so that it makes sense, is the idea that like you go to therapy, or even if you're a Catholic and you go to confession, there's research by Blanchard and Farber that say that 93% of clients report lying to their therapist. So what Dr. Lukens has done with his method is, it's because he's really looking at the mind in a scientific way, with the assumption that it is a type of emergent property of matter, like looking at it with a scientific lens. He's able to see past people's self-report. So I tell you I'm not depressed, and then 3 weeks later you find out I've committed suicide. It's not that we can read minds, but it's that we can predict human behavior, and we can predict, given a little bit of information, less than the average person using any other modality, what is going on for the person inside their meaningful world, what's going on inside their head.
And
I think we can read minds in a sense. Well, because
we come pretty dang close.
Well, you're looking. So was there a squirrel in the yard? You see the tracks of the squirrel. You know what you're looking for.
Yeah, evidence.
So you see the tracks of the mind, and that's how so somebody says something, and I'm seeing the tracks underneath it that are actually going in a direction opposite of what they're saying. Mm-hmm. So it is like reading minds. Now, of course, you check it out, you test them or whatnot, but it is like reading minds.
So that's the major difference, I would say.
So the app, what's the app do though? The app reads people's minds?
TruthMap app. The TruthMap app.
Well, I would say it helps.
It's a lie detector.
Well, yeah, right, exactly. You
like
get shock treatment if you say the wrong thing. No, it helps you read your own mind. It helps you examine the tracks of your own mind. So I'm not in the room with you, but my mind is in my conversation is in the room with you. Holly's mind and Holly's conversation's in the room with you. And so we're helping you discover yourself. You say what you think you mean, and then we help you look for the tracks underneath it. Mm-hmm. And so this is really empowering. People discover, they have these insights, they get these discoveries all the time, just talking about their stuff from this perspective.
Gotcha. So it's called TruthMap, right?
Yes.
TruthMap.
All right, cool. And then where are you in? What stage are you in on this development?
Well, we have a beta MVP on both the App Store and Google Play Store, and it's right now available for. It's a mental health app for women, and it's beta. It's got a chat bot and everything, but we are in the development stage of the app, obviously with Jared and his amazing team. We're raising funds right now, and then hopefully move straight into design and development.
Well, look, I want to thank you guys for coming on today. I know we went over a little bit here, but what's the best way for people to find out about you or reach you or engage with you?
Yes, they can find us online at truthmap.co. And our Instagram, the TruthMap, at the TruthMap. On Twitter, it's just TruthMap.
Gotcha. Any final words, Dr. Mike?
CBI.
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 I love it. New definition of love.
Yes.
New definition of love.
Thank you so much, C-Roc, for having us.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate your time being here and sharing with my audience. And guys, you've been listening to the What Are You Made Of podcast with your boy, the unstoppable Mike C-Roc. I'm unstoppable because I am studying my mind. I'm trying to figure out how it works and understand if I can predict what can happen with it as well. So thank you for being here. Until next time, be unstoppable.